Hey, welcome to the Small Workshop. I'm the Small Workshop guy, Paul Carlson. So this is a little live session. This is kind of a continuation of a video I released earlier this week where I was talking about using a pattern that you make in order to cut tenons. And I had been cutting a lot of tenons using this method, but I was using cedar. So I didn't have to do any preparation ahead of time because cedar is very soft, and being able to plunge down with the router bit to the pattern and then take out all of the cedar is within realm. However, most of the time, or a lot of the time, you're going to be working with hardwoods, red oak or walnut or maple or something of that nature. So I thought I should probably enhance the discussion. So this is talking about using your router with a pattern bit on it in order to follow a pattern and cut out tenons. First thing you got to do, obviously, is make a pattern. That's really easy because there's no adjusting for any kind of bushing bindings or anything. You just simply lay everything out exactly according to your plans. So if your plans called for 3 tenons that were 1 5/8 long, then you just make 3 tenons that are whatever the width, in this case, 1/2 inch, 1 5/8 long. So I just make that pattern by cutting strips on my table saw. Do those strips really, really precisely. When you put them all together, check them with a caliper and see if they equal to what they're supposed to total up to. And work on them hard, get them really nice, because they're going to determine all of your tenons. Once you've got the pattern made, and the additional thing you want to add to your pattern are some side pieces. The 2 side pieces should not just be the same 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood or MDF, but they should be taller. They should be as tall as your pattern plus the tallness of your workpiece. In this case, I have a 3/4 inch pattern and a 1 1/2 inch workpiece, so I need 2 1/4 inches. So I cut some strips 2 1/4 inches. Then place those strips where they're beyond, the edge of your workpiece. Place them further up. That way, when your router is going to cut off to the end of your workpiece, there's something there to support it, and you won't get tear out. If you did this without these end pieces, first of all, these are useful to lock your workpiece into your pattern and hold it down. But secondly, they provide against that tear out. Now, when you're working with hardwoods, you don't want to be trying to stick a router bit in there and going down 1.5 inches and going into the middle of your pattern. That's putting a lot of stress on your bit and a lot of stress on your router. And depending on the power of your router, you may have some trouble. And you're looking for kickback and you're looking for some other things. So what you should do is get rid of a bunch of the waste area first so that your router doesn't have to do that. So the way I do that is I just put my workpiece into my pattern, and then I flip it over, line it up to where it needs to be lined up. And then I just take a nice, this is a Milwaukee marking device. And again, make sure it's lined up. And simply do a little rough outline of where your tenons are and your side pieces. Make sure you mark off what's the waste area, so you don't end up cutting into your tenons instead of your thing. Then with that marked off, you need some way to get rid of the waste area. Well, you're a woodworker, there's a lot of different ways. My preferred way is always something where I can secure the workpiece, use a power tool, and feel the safest, and where I can line things up the best and things that are most stable. But, a lot of different ways you cut this. You could drill in here with a hand drill and then saw in to get to that relief drill point and take out the waste, and you can do that by hand with a Japanese saw or even an American saw. You could, use a jigsaw. You could drill and use a jigsaw. You could drill and use a bandsaw. So my preferred method is to take all these pieces and then mark them up like this, and then take them all to the drill press and drill them where I've got a lot of stability and a lot of preciseness. And also I've got the base under so I don't get any tear out. Then I take it to my bandsaw and just cut, just making sure I stay away from, or I don't go over these lines. These lines were inside of my pattern. My router is going to actually take away these lines when I use it. So I get that marked up. I get it all cut out. It doesn't have to be precise. As you can see, that's awfully rough. I got a lot of jagged edges. And then that gives me something that my router bit can handle. You then get it placed into your pattern, get it lined up, and that, because these are holding it sideways, the lineup is merely having the ends of your workpiece be at the end of your pattern tenons. In this case, I'm going to use my top base here because I don't want to get anywhere near my Samurai Carpenter workbench. Work too hard on it to tear it up. Trying to pass it down to future generations, so I don't want a lot of marks on it. Don't want to cut it into it too many times. Inevitably, I will, but let's keep it to a minimum. So I like to have a little platform on top, so I'm not going to make any mistakes. I almost made a mistake the other day. I almost had this too far in. Used some hold downs on my workbench and just about routed into the apron of my workbench. I tell you what, at that point, I probably would have quit woodworking, sold the workbench to somebody, and gone away crying. All right, so I get that locked down. Again, I just made that mistake. I locked it down where I would be cutting into my platform. Stupid me. That's what you get for trying to talk and work at the same time. So let's pull this puppy a little further out to where when I get into these, as far as I'm going to go, I got plenty of room here before I get to my bench top. Now I do need enough room, and I need to check that for my Samurai Carpenter stability base, I will call it. I want to make sure the edge of that can reach such that I'm getting all the way, when I do my routing, that I can get it all the way to the end of my slot. And in fact, I've got just enough room there, so I'm in good shape for that. So I think I'm ready to go. Let's get it plugged in and get some safety gear on and give it a go. I have set the bit at the proper height where the 1.5 inch is where the cutter is, but this ball bearing roller on the end, or a pattern bit on the end of this bit, is going to run along my pattern so that it won't go any further than where the pattern is. That's the theory of these things. This is the other thing I did was I lubricated my ball bearing here, and I made sure that the way that it's held in there with an Allen wrench, little nut, that's not working its way loose. So keep it lubricated so it doesn't get overly hot, and make sure you watch that ball bearing so that it doesn't fall off on you while you're working on it. All right. Another advantage of getting rid of that waste area is that you don't have as much sawdust flying all around the place. You've cut it out and it's over in your trash barrel somewhere, so you've probably cut down on 3/4 of your sawdust, because this is one messy operation. So let's take that out and take a look at it. So, you know, I should have cut off a little bit more there. And you can always throw it back in and finish it off. I got a little more there, or I can just chisel those off. So if you have a really nice solid pattern, and if you take your time and you cut off that waste area, so you're not overworking your bit, and I was filming, so I got a little rush there, but I would have gone back over some of these pieces to make them exactly like my pattern. In this case, I was a little out away from the pattern. So anyway, it works cool as heck. I didn't get any tear out over here on the side because that was secured. I'm going to take off those little corner things there with a oscillating sander. And that should fit my tenons, because I worked on my pattern so that when I cut these tenons, I said it should fit my mortises, that when I cut these tenons this way, they just barely fit into my mortises. So that little extra steps there that you should do compared to the last video that I did, and that's because you're dealing with hardwood and you don't want to stress your router as much. So anyway, that's my presentation today, and I hope you get something out of it. Give it a try. You know, try it on some scrap pieces first. See how you like it. It's certainly a nice way, if you don't want to do everything with Japanese saws, to do these things with your router. Small Workshop Guy, signing off.